Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Brazen. Brazen is a romantic crime thriller based on the Nora Roberts novel Brazen Virtue, and tells the story of Grace Miller, a famous crime novel author who goes to visit her sister Catherine to take a break from her career. One night, while she's on a date with a detective who lives next door, her sister is unexpectedly murdered in her own home. As the police begin their investigation, Grace finds out that her sister lived a double life as a webcam performer, and after giving it some thought, she decides to involve herself in the case in spite of police opposition in an attempt to solve her sister's murder and bring her killer to justice. The movie's story is about as tired and played out as you could expect. The idea of a crime author becoming involved in an actual murder mystery is an interesting concept, but in this movie it's executed to an almost embarrassing level of incompetence. The main character Grace, who's played by Alyssa Milano, has nothing noteworthy about her apart from her writing career, which is only referenced a small handful of times. Beyond this, she's the same as any other middle-aged female protagonist one might see on a made-for-TV movie special. One thing that actually makes her stand out, though, in the worst way possible, is how she continuously inserts herself in situations she has no business involving herself in. While her motivations are understandable, it doesn't change the fact that she's a civilian engaging in police business. And the way the movie tacks her onto the police crew is beyond ridiculous. Grace claims that she's able to help the police because she's an expert in determining motives based on her experience in writing crime novels. This is like saying someone should be hired to build a real-life space rocket because they have experience building them with Legos. On top of this, the movie applies this feminist light element to her personality, which I'm not opposed to, but it's so tacked on I don't know why they bothered. All it is that Grace name drops things like misogyny and patriarchy and how it motivates her writing, but it never has anything to do with the story, so there's no point in mentioning it. The detective Ed Jennings is Grace's counterpart in assisting with the investigation. Just like her, Ed is one of the blandest characters you can imagine, with his aversion to coffee being the only distinguishing characteristic about him. However, he also adds a bit of flavor to the story in that he's also Grace's love interest, and this is something that I actually have to give major props to the movie for. It doesn't waste any time building up romantic tension between the two, with them being set up together right from the get-go and allowing the movie to spend more time focusing on the story. Unfortunately, Ed still has his shortcomings when it comes to the murder mystery he's trying to solve. It doesn't make sense how he and the other officers he works with just buckle over and let Grace tag along for police interviews, reviewing evidence, and doing pretty much anything else a police officer would do, but as a civilian. Even worse is that sometimes the police will make decisions based on what Grace suggests. One example of this is when Grace plans to bait the killer into a trap and the police captain automatically goes with her idea, just because, and I quote the captain when I say this, she says that Grace has guts. I hope I never end up having a police chief like her in my neighborhood. The lack of observable protocol throughout the movie annoyed me the more I continued to watch it, to the point that I wondered how they could get anything done. On the flip side of the coin, the murder itself was also lacking in execution. It doesn't even happen until about 20 minutes or so into the movie, leaving an hour or so for the rest of the story to follow, which essentially means that the movie is one long episode of Law & Order SVU without any commercial breaks. It's an apt description if you think about it, because the movie has a cheap look to it. The camera angles are predictable, the sets are unimaginative, and the dialogue is wooden. It feels like another episode of whatever typical TV crime drama is out there, and a bad one at that. But getting back to the murder, their logic isn't fully explained. They murder Grace's sister, but decide to continue murdering other people as well for reasons that aren't clear. They are connected in the sense that they're all webcam models, but there's no effort made to explain why the murderer feels the need to keep killing them. It was immediately obvious to me who the killer was as soon as they were introduced, and the movie's attempts at misdirection were just laughable. There was one instance where it even resulted in a plot hole, as the killer is injured in a scuffle, yet somehow this injury is pinned on another character without any reason given as to why they had it. And those few scenes where the murderer commits their acts are just about the only interesting things that happen in it. The rest of the movie plods along at a snail's pace, with characters talking non-stop and subplots that end up going nowhere. Grace's sister's ex-husband annoyed me the most in this regard. He's made out to be the prime suspect just because he's her ex, has sole custody of their son, and has a douchey personality to boot. Despite his alibi being rock solid, Grace keeps keeps dragging things out with him for no reason other than to artificially stir up conflict. Then later on, there's some sketchy real estate stuff that the ex is attached to as a lawyer, but it's only mentioned once and never again thereafter. Once again, the misdirection is lousy, and there's no payoff to the sub-stories because they barely have any time to grow and branch out from the main narrative. I'm also a bit on the fence when it comes to how camming is portrayed in this movie. I like how it's shown as a side gig of sorts that many everyday normal people participate in to make a few extra bucks, which does add some realism to the plot, but in this movie it mostly consists of stereotypical dominatrixes whipping their gear at the camera and not doing much else. I do have to say though that whoever thought it was a good idea to insert moaning noises to go along with the soundtrack of those camming scenes needs a stern talking to. They cheapened the serious nature of the movie's subject matter and were just plain cheesy. And something else that was cheesy that probably bothered me more than it should have is how it's used as an adaptation. It's a movie based on a Nora Roberts novel in which the novel itself is also featured in the movie under the name of the protagonist, Grace Miller, almost as if Nora Roberts is Grace Miller. I may be reading too much into it, but this sort of factored into how I felt about the movie at large. It just has this sense of smugness about it, thinking it can explain away police protocol and leave supporting characters out to dry for the sake of plot convenience, all for a high and mighty protagonist that doesn't deserve the attention she gets. Overall, Brazen is a fitting title for this terrible excuse of a crime thriller. It is bold and shameless in how lazily it executes its story and characters, and is little more than a selfish exercise of vapid imagination. If you're someone who enjoys watching CSI, Criminal Minds, Law and Order, NCIS, or any other of those bland, boring, primetime TV crime dramas, you may enjoy this one enough, but for me, this was a complete waste of time. There's nothing about this movie that makes it stand out from the crowd, and what is there is a painfully dull experience to sit through. It's another paint-by-numbers murder mystery, only this time, it paints everything in the wrong colors. What did you think about this movie? Do you think it makes for good background watching material, or did you find it just as bad and boring to sit through as I did? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Brazen. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Indonesian dramatic thriller, Photocopier. Bye bye!